The moment people find out you have money, they start spending it, not out loud, not all at once, but quietly in their heads. Before you have even left the room, a dinner bill drifts toward your side of the table. A friend says you are better at handling these things than I am. A relative who never once asked for help now calls you first when something goes wrong, and the strangest part is that most of them do not even realize they are doing it. They genuinely believe you can carry more because at some point you made the mistake of proving that you could. This is the story of two women who learned that lesson the hard way. And if you have ever worked quietly for years to finally get your finances right, you need to hear this before it happens to you. Her name was Claire. 54 years old, nearly 30 years in hospital administration outside Minneapolis. She was not flashy. She drove the same silver Honda for 11 years and packed her lunch while coworkers spent $30 a day on takeout. People thought she was just careful. What nobody knew, not her friends, not her cousins, not even her own sister, was that Claire had quietly built something most Americans never managed to reach. Over $400,000 across retirement accounts, investments and emergency savings. She did not advertise it. She did not hint at it. She just built it in silence. And for years, that silence was her armor. Then one evening at a family beach house in South Carolina, one honest sentence said in the wrong room changed everything. Within 18 months, Claire would lose relationships, lose peace of mind, and unknowingly put nearly half her retirement future at risk. Not because of a market crash, not a scam, not a single reckless decision. It happened because people found out she had money. Nobody warns you about the hidden tax of success, not the government kind, the people kind. The moment others believe you are financially comfortable, expectations start accumulating around you like debt, and unlike actual debt, you cannot see the balance, you cannot calculate it, you just feel it. Every year you feel a little more financially exhausted than you should be, despite earning enough to feel secure. We are taught that money problems come from bad budgeting or poor investments, but for a lot of people, especially those who spent years quietly becoming responsible, the real danger does not begin until they finally get stable. Because stability changes the way the world sees you, and once the world sees you differently, it starts treating you differently. Friends begin treating your money like emotional support. Family quietly reorganizes responsibilities around your financial strength, and you, almost without noticing, start saying yes to things you would have questioned before, because saying no suddenly feels wrong for someone who is doing well. Drop in the comments where you are watching from, we would love to know. And hit subscribe to Emma Invests so you do not miss what is coming next. Here is what makes Claire's story so important. She did not brag. She did not post vacations online. Most people who knew her would have called her modest. That is exactly the point. Because sometimes all it takes is one honest answer in the wrong room. It was a family reunion. Her brother had just lost his job after 16 years at a manufacturing company. Her niece was drowning in student debt. Her cousin's husband had stopped working after a medical crisis, and the mortgage was slipping behind. Money hung in the air all week. Nobody named it directly, but everyone could feel it. One night after dinner, wine in hand, her brother looked at her and laughed. You are probably the only one here who actually planned ahead. Just a joke, the kind families make. But then someone asked if she had started thinking about retirement. Another relative guessed she probably had a decent nest egg, and Claire, wanting to be honest, wanting to connect, answered the question. $400,000. The room went quiet, just for a second. Not dramatic, not hostile, just long enough for something invisible to enter and never quite leave. Her cousin's expression changed first. Her niece asked how she had possibly saved that much. Her brother went quiet for the rest of the night. The conversation moved on. The dynamic did not. Here's what nobody tells you about financial damage. It rarely arrives as one disaster. It leaks. Over the following weeks, Claire started getting messages that felt different. Small favors. Her niece wanted budgeting help. Her brother mentioned how stressful bills had gotten. Her cousin just wanted to talk through some things. None of it sounded manipulative. That is what made it so hard to resist. These were people she loved, but without anyone agreeing to it out loud, her family had quietly moved her into a new category. She was now the stable one, the secure one, the person who could absorb more pressure than everyone else. And once people assign you that role, they start building their lives around it. Dinner bills, hotel upgrades, car repairs for her niece, each one felt justified emotionally. Each one on its own looked like love. But slowly the pattern became expensive, not just financially but psychologically. Claire started feeling guilty spending money on herself. She delayed retirement trips she had planned for years. She pulled back on investment contributions because unexpected family expenses kept appearing. And the most painful change of all was that she no longer felt at ease around the people she loved. Every dinner invitation made her wonder who would end up paying more. Every late-night call filled her with dread before she answered. Because once people believe you have financial stability, they begin treating your money as flexibility they do not have. And eventually you start seeing yourself that way too. This is not just Claire's story. Researchers in behavioral psychology and personal finance have studied this pattern for years. Once people publicly identify as financially successful, their spending begins shifting in ways that feel emotionally necessary. Economists call parts of this identity consistent spending, which means subconsciously spending money to maintain the version of yourself that others now expect to see. And this effect gets stronger inside families because financial stress in American households right now is staggering. Millions of people, even those earning six figures, are living paycheck to paycheck. So when someone inside a family appears stable, attention moves toward them. Responsibilities follow, expectations follow. Maybe you already know this feeling. Maybe you became the dependable sibling, the one relatives called in emergencies. The one everyone assumed could handle more because you always had before. And maybe you started wondering why your financial progress felt slower even though you were doing everything right. That is not a coincidence. That is the hidden tax. It did not stay in Claire's family. At work, after casually mentioning she had planned ahead pretty well, the dynamic shifted too. Group lunches moved to pricier restaurants because no one thought she would mind. A colleague laughed at a team dinner, saying Claire has got us covered. She is the smart one here. Harmless humor. But Claire smiled and paid the larger portion anyway, because correcting the assumption felt more uncomfortable than absorbing the cost. That is how it works. Nobody coordinates against you. Nobody plans it. People simply adjust to the information they have. The moment they believe you can carry more, they lean towards you, unconsciously, naturally, and over time you start leaning too. What made it even harder was what Claire felt inside. Part of her was proud. She remembered being 30, freshly divorced, terrified. Skipping vacations, bringing coffee from home, working overtime for years, her savings represented sacrifice. And when people treated her as financially stable, part of her wanted to live up to that image because it validated everything she had worked for. But another part of her was exhausted. She lay awake calculating numbers she had already run a dozen times. She felt guilt before almost every spending decision. She worried that saying no would make her look selfish, that her family would quietly resent her, that money had changed her, and maybe the most haunting thought of all was this: what if they were right? There is a reason wealthy people often go quieter over time. It is not arrogance, it is secrecy for the sake of it. Many of them simply learned after one painful revelation, too many, that money works best like a lighthouse switched off. The brighter you make your financial life visible, the more it attracts. People steer toward it emotionally, socially, and financially, even when they never intend to. Coming up, you will see how one act of generosity from Claire triggered a chain reaction that cost far more than she imagined. You will meet Linda, a woman in Ohio walking into the exact same trap at the exact same moment. And you will understand why some of the most financially secure people in America deliberately make themselves look far less wealthy than they are. Several states away, a woman named Linda was stepping into the same trap and she never saw it coming. 52 years old, divorced nearly a decade. Scheduling coordinator at a dental practice outside Columbus, Ohio. Steady job, nothing flashy, nothing that suggested wealth. She bought clothes on clearance, clipped digital coupons every Sunday, still used a coffee maker she had owned since her 40s. The thing still works fine, she would say. But for 12 years, Linda had been running a quiet, disciplined financial operation behind the scenes. Every paycheck had a system, every raise went partly into investments, and by 52, she had crossed a number that once felt impossible after her divorce: $250,000. That number had cost her something real. Birthdays with smaller gifts, weekends at home while friends traveled, years of watching coworkers remodel kitchens while she moved money into index funds instead. But for the first time since her marriage ended, Linda felt safe, and she protected that feeling by protecting her privacy. Her daughter knew she was responsible. Her sister Karen assumed she was doing okay. Nobody knew the number. Then came the family beach trip. South Carolina, 6 days, wine on the deck, ocean in the background, and the question that always surfaces eventually in middle-class families. Seriously though, are you actually doing okay financially? Linda hesitated only briefly. She answered that she had saved around $250,000. The pause lasted just a second longer than normal, but it was enough. Karen's expression shifted. A cousin suddenly had questions about investing she had never shown interest in before. Someone jokingly called Linda the rich one, even though $250,000 was nowhere near enough to stop working permanently. By the time the vacation ended, the expectations had already packed their bags and followed Linda home. Karen started calling more frequently about money worries. A cousin wanted help understanding debt consolidation. Linda's nephew needed temporary help with rent. Each situation sounded emotionally reasonable in isolation. Linda kept telling herself she was simply helping family during difficult times. But slowly the requests became expectations rather than exceptions, and then something even more revealing happened inside Linda's own mind. She started performing financial stability rather than simply living it. ordering more expensive meals when others were watching because choosing the cheaper options suddenly felt inconsistent with who people believed she was, staying quiet about her own financial concerns because everyone assumed she was fine. She even started spending money to look less wealthy, wearing slightly older clothes around family, mentioning costs more often in conversation, saying things like, "Yeah, that was a stretch for me too," even when it was not entirely true. She was not lying exactly. She was managing perception, and she was exhausting herself doing it. This is what researchers mean when they talk about the psychological weight of financial visibility. It does not just change how you spend money. It changes how you think, how you move through rooms, how comfortable you feel in your own life, because wealth, even modest hard-earned middle-class wealth, becomes a performance the moment other people know about it. And performances are exhausting to maintain indefinitely. 18 months after that beach house dinner, Claire sat down with her financial planner for an annual review. The numbers told a story she had not let herself fully see yet. Her retirement contributions had dropped nearly 30% compared to the 2 prior years, not because her income fell, because her spending had quietly expanded to fill the gap. More dining out, more generous gifts, more travel upgrades for others. More help that was individually small but collectively significant. The planner pulled up a projection. If the pattern continued, Claire would enter retirement with roughly $60,000 less than she had originally planned. And that did not account for the compounded investment growth she had sacrificed by reducing contributions during her highest earning years. $60,000, not from a market crash, not from fraud, from dinner bills, family trips, car repairs, holiday gifts. Emotional kindness spread across 18 months. She sat quietly for a moment looking at the number. Then she asked the question that had been sitting underneath everything for a year and a half. How do I stop this without destroying my relationships? The planner leaned back and said something Claire did not expect. You do not fix this by saying no more often. You fix it by making the yes less available in the first place. This is the part of the conversation that almost never gets discussed openly, but probably should. Some of the most financially secure people in America are not the ones driving the most expensive cars or living in the biggest houses. They are in many cases deliberately invisible, not dishonest, not cold, not withholding, just quiet in a very specific way. They have learned, usually through an experience exactly like Claire's or Linda's, that financial privacy is not the same as financial secrecy. Secrecy implies shame. Privacy implies protection, and protecting the foundation you built through years of discipline is not selfish. It is responsible. Here is what that actually looks like in practice. The first step is to stop volunteering numbers, not to deceive anyone, but because specific numbers change relationships in ways that vague descriptions never do. Saying you have saved a decent amount and saying you have saved $400,000 are both honest. Only one of them rearranges the room. Claire's number became the problem, not the fact that she had savings, but that her family now had a specific figure to measure expectations against. A number that made requests feel more justified than they might have otherwise. The second step is to separate financial help from financial identity. There is a difference between choosing to help someone and being expected to help someone. One comes from love, the other comes from obligation. And obligation quietly corrodes even the strongest relationships over time. Claire began drawing that line not dramatically, not coldly, but consistently. When her brother mentioned bills were tight, she expressed genuine empathy without reaching for her wallet. When her niece needed financial advice, she gave her time and knowledge rather than money, small shifts. But they slowly loosened the role she had accidentally accepted. The third step is to reclaim the internal story. Both Claire and Linda had allowed other people's perception of them to change how they saw themselves. They had become the stable one, the helper, the financially secure one, and that identity had started driving decisions from the inside out. Recovering from that required deliberately reconnecting with the private version of their financial story, the years of sacrifice, the specific choices, the discipline those numbers represented, not as a reason to feel superior, but as a reminder that those resources belonged to a future they were still trying to reach. Not to a role assigned to them at a dinner table in South Carolina. Linda's moment came differently and more quietly. It was a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, looking at her investment accounts for the first time in months. The number was lower than it should have been, not dramatically, but noticeably, and Linda, who had tracked every dollar with near obsessive care for 12 years, knew exactly why. She sat with that for a long time. Then she did something she had not done in over a year. She wrote down her original retirement goal, the number she had been working toward since her divorce, the number that once felt impossible and then slowly had started to feel real. She looked at the gap between where she was and where she had been heading before the beach trip. Then she looked at her phone. 14 unread messages, most of them containing some version of a financial problem waiting for her response. And for the first time she felt something shift. Not anger, not resentment, something quieter, clarity. She realized she had been so focused on not appearing selfish that she had actually become irresponsible, not toward her family, but toward herself. Toward the 62-year-old version of herself who was still counting on the woman sitting there today to make the right call. She started making changes that week, small at first, responding with warmth but without automatic solutions, contributing less but more deliberately, so that what she gave came from genuine choice and not guilt. It was not always comfortable. Some people noticed the shift. Karen took a little longer to call. A few family members seemed quietly disappointed. But Linda's account started moving in the right direction again, and something else happened that she did not expect. She started sleeping better. Claire and Linda are not unusual. Their stories play out in different forms in different cities across different income levels every single day. The specific details change, the dynamic does not, because this is not really about money, it is about visibility. And visibility, once granted, cannot easily be taken back. The people who navigate this best, who build real lasting financial security and protect it over decades, tend to share a few quiet habits. They celebrate privately, they plan privately, they are generous on their own terms and their own timeline, not in response to pressure or expectation. And they have made peace with the truth that sounds simple but takes years to actually live. Your financial future is the one relationship you cannot afford to neglect. Not your friendships, not your family, not your professional reputation. Those matter enormously, but none of them can be sustained long-term by someone who quietly dismantled their own financial security trying to maintain them. The most loving thing you can do for the people around you, especially the ones who will eventually depend on you, is to arrive at retirement whole, not depleted, not resentful, not performing stability while quietly running out of it. Claire eventually rebuilt her contribution rate. She set firm but kind boundaries around financial conversations. She stopped explaining herself, which counterintuitively made her easier to be around. People stopped asking quite as often once the answers stopped arriving automatically. It took time. Some relationships shifted. One cousin grew distant for nearly a year before things normalized. Her brother took longer to come around. But Claire reached 60 with her retirement intact. More importantly, she reached 60 knowing something she wished she had understood 20 years earlier. The most powerful financial decision you will ever make is not where to invest. It is who you tell. If any part of this felt familiar, if you recognized yourself in Claire or in Linda or in the quiet exhaustion of being the stable one in someone else's story, then you already know the most important thing. Awareness is where the change begins. You do not have to cut people off. You do not have to stop being generous. You just have to stop letting other people's perception of your finances become the budget you actually live on. Protect the number, protect the timeline, protect the future that the past version of you worked so hard to make possible. If this hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe, because the next video goes even deeper into the psychology of why financially disciplined people so often end up carrying everyone else and the surprisingly simple mindset shift that changes everything.